Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to really dig into large-scale Scrum, or LeSS. It's a framework for, taking Agile and scaling it up to, lots of teams, but without losing that core customer focus that makes Scrum, Scrum.
And that's what's so cool about LeSS. It's not about adding a bunch of rigid rules or making things more complicated. It's really about simplifying, stripping away all the extra stuff and focusing on those core Agile principles that make it so effective.
Okay, so less is more kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
You gave me a ton of guides and rules and stories from real companies using it, and I want to get into all of that. But first, let's start with the basics. What is LeSS?
At its heart, LeSS is really just Scrum applied to multiple teams working together on one product. So think of it as taking those familiar Scrum events, roles, artifacts, and scaling them up to handle a bigger project.
So instead of having a bunch of separate Scrum teams working on little pieces of a product, you've got all these teams working together as one big unit, all focused on delivering value to the customer, right?
Yeah, and what's really important to remember is that LeSS is deliberately incomplete. It doesn't dictate every single step. It provides a framework and some guiding principles, and then it encourages teams to learn and adapt based on their specific situation.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. It's about letting the teams own their process and find out what works for them, rather than forcing them to follow some cookie cutter approach, right?
Yeah.
So continuous improvement is built right into LeSS.
Absolutely. LeSS really emphasizes empirical process control. That basically means that the teams are constantly experimenting, inspecting and adapting their approach based on what they learn as they go. It's about embracing change and constantly trying to improve.
So it's more like a set of guiding principles, not a strict recipe, right? It sets the stage for teams to kind of find their own way within that broader framework.
Exactly. And those principles are really what make LeSS so effective at dealing with those challenges of scaling Agile. One of the most important ones is the idea of whole product focus.
Oh, yeah, whole product focus. From what I understand, that means no matter how many teams are working on a product, there's only one product backlog, one product owner, and ultimately one potentially shippable increment at the end of each sprint.
Exactly. And that's so important for avoiding getting stuck in silos or focusing on just components. It's about making sure everyone is aligned around delivering a really cohesive, valuable product to the customer.
Yeah, I get that. It's like avoiding those little optimizations that might seem beneficial on their own, but actually end up hurting the overall performance of the system, right?
Precisely. And this emphasis on the whole product really naturally leads into another fundamental principle of LeSS, which is customer centricity.
Customer centricity. So that's all about, understanding what the customer actually needs and building a solution that actually solves their problem, right? It's not just about, building the right thing technically, but also about building it right from the customer's perspective.
Yeah, that's it. And in LeSS, this means that everyone on the team, from the developers to the testers, everyone understands how their work contributes to providing value for the customer. It's about fostering this mindset where the end user is always top of mind.
Okay, so it's not just enough to build something that works technically, right? You also got to make sure that it actually solves a problem for the customer and that it's something they're going to find valuable and easy to use.
Exactly. And LeSS encourages this customer-centric approach through things like direct customer collaboration, frequent feedback loops, and a real focus on delivering those done items that the customer can actually use.
And this leads us to another really important principle, which is transparency. LeSS really emphasizes open communication, like everyone being on the same sprint schedule and clear visibility into what's done and what isn't.
Yes, and that transparency is really key for building trust and accountability, among the teams. When everyone has a clear understanding of the goals the progress being made and any challenges that come up, it's much easier to work together effectively and find solutions.
Okay, so to really see how all of this comes together, let's dive into a real world example, like a less product group.
Mhm.
One of the sources you gave me walked us through a typical sprint in a less environment and highlighted key events like sprint planning, product backlog refinement, and the sprint review and retrospective.
Yeah, let's start with sprint planning. One of the interesting things about LeSS is how it handles sprint planning with multiple teams. As teams mature and get more aligned, they start using representatives for coordination instead of having, everyone attend every meeting.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It would be pretty chaotic to have everyone from every team in every single meeting.
Yeah,
So like each team picks a representative to go to sprint planning one.
exactly. And during sprint planning one, these representatives work together with the product owner to discuss those items in the product backlog. They consider, things like priorities, dependencies, and how each team's going to contribute to the overall sprint goal.
And it sounds like there's a lot of built-in flexibility. For example, they mentioned like having a multi-team design workshop after sprint planning one if there's a need to really dive deep into a specific design challenge. So it's about, adapting the process to fit the needs of the specific sprint.
Right, right. And they even pointed out that, as teams get more mature, they might realize that they could have anticipated that need for that design workshop earlier, you know.
Yeah.
And that highlights that learning and continuous improvement aspect of less. They're always experimenting and refining their process.
Oh, I love that. They're not afraid to try something and then adjust based on what they learn. It really embodies that empirical process control we were talking about earlier, and that focus on continuous improvement also extends to the product backlog refinement process, right?
Yeah, and this is where the team really gets into the details of those items in the product backlog. They clarify the requirements, break those big items down into smaller, more manageable chunks, and estimate the effort involved.
And one thing that really stood out to me was that Lesko encourages different types of refinement, each with a specific purpose. Like they mentioned overall refinement, multi-team refinement, and even rotation refinement. It's about choosing the right approach based on the complexity and the dependencies of the items you're refining.
Exactly. And what's really important is that the product owner isn't working in isolation. They're collaborating closely with the development teams
Mm.
to make sure everyone understands those technical details and that the items are really ready to be pulled into a sprint.
Okay, so they're not just like throwing stuff over the wall and saying, "Here, figure this out."
Right. It's much more collaborative.
And they also emphasize the importance of involving the customer in that refinement process, right? It's about making sure that they're building the right things and solving the right problems from the customer's perspective. Okay, so speaking of sprints, let's talk about the sprint review and the retrospective, those key moments where the team gets to reflect on the sprint, gather feedback, and identify opportunities for improvement.
Yeah, and in Lennis, they encourage both team level and overall retrospective. So each team has its own retrospective to focus on their specific challenges and improvements. But then there's also an overall retrospective that brings together, representatives from all the teams, the product owner, the scrum masters, even managers.
Okay, so it's like, you've got those individual team retrospectives to focus on the team specific stuff. And then you've got that overall retrospective to really look at the big picture, right?
Exactly. And that overall retrospective is really where that systems thinking aspect of Lennis shines through. It's an opportunity to kind of zoom out and look at the system as a whole and identify any systemic issues that might be impacting, multiple teams or even the entire development process.
So it's about understanding that the system is more than just, the sum of its parts, right? To optimize the whole thing, you really got to understand how all those parts interact and how they influence each other.
Precisely.
That's great.
And that kind of leads us into another interesting aspect of less, which is the less huge framework.
Less huge. Now that sounds That sounds intense. That's for scaling less up to like those really massive product groups, right? We're talking like hundreds of people working on a single product.
That's right. That's right. And one of the key differences in Less Huge is the introduction of something called requirement areas
Mm.
to handle all that increased complexity. Basically, these are clusters of teams, usually 4 to 8 teams,
Oh.
all focused on a related set of customer-centric features.
So instead of having like, all those teams working from one giant product backlog, you're breaking the work down into smaller, more manageable chunks, each with its own dedicated team and backlog.
Exactly. And each requirement area has an area product owner who's responsible for that area backlog. But it's important to remember that the area backlog is still just a view into the one overall product backlog. So it's not like each area becomes like its own isolated silo.
Right, right. There's still that connection back to the main product and the one product owner who has the final say on priorities. It's a way of balancing, giving those teams autonomy with making sure everything's aligned with the overall vision.
Exactly, exactly. And one of the sources you gave me actually provided a really interesting example of this in action. They talked about a situation where a new requirement area was created specifically to deal with the complexities of the Dodd-Frank regulation.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I remember that. They started by creating a new requirement area with a dedicated area product owner and a small initial team, and they really stressed the importance of taking a bite, starting with a manageable chunk of that overall requirement to gain a deeper understanding and make progress quickly.
Exactly. And as they work through that initial bite, they could start to figure out whether they needed additional teams or resources to fully address the complexities of Dodd-Frank.
So it's a really iterative and incremental approach, which aligns perfectly with the agile mindset, right? They start small, they learn fast, and then they scale up as needed. And this example also highlights, the importance of having the right people with the right expertise in those key roles. They mentioned that they specifically chose a team with existing knowledge of related areas to lead this new requirement area. So they recognize that need for both, domain expertise and a willingness to learn.
Okay, so now making the shift to a less environment is obviously a big undertaking, especially for larger organizations that are used to more traditional ways of working. So what are some of the key considerations when it comes to adopting less?
Well, one of the sources really stressed the importance of starting with volunteers, and I mean, true volunteers, people who are genuinely excited about embracing the less framework and championing that change within their teams.
Right. So it's about creating that sense of ownership and buy-in rather than forcing it on people.
Exactly. And that kind of leads into another crucial consideration, which is moving away from component teams to feature teams.
Right. And the source we have here goes into quite a bit of detail about this concept. Feature teams are cross-functional and they're focused on delivering those complete customer-centric features. And this is a big shift from component teams that specialize in specific, technical areas.
Right, right. So it sounds like it requires, breaking down those silos, fostering more collaboration, and really giving the teams ownership over the entire feature development process. They even suggested that organizations might need to start with what they called extended component teams as a kind of stepping stone towards full-fledged feature teams.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you don't have to make that radical change overnight. You can transition gradually and adapt less to the specific context of your organization. But the ultimate goal is to move towards a more agile and customer-centric way of working.
Right. So it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's not like you flip a switch and suddenly, you're a less organization.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
the journey doesn't stop there, right? They really emphasize that adopting less is an ongoing process of continuous improvement. It's about constantly looking for ways to optimize the product, the process, and even the organization itself.
Absolutely. And to help guide that journey, Les provides a set of really practical guides that are full of tips and techniques. For example, they talk about Just Talk, which encourages teams to communicate directly with each other and find solutions collaboratively rather than relying on complex processes or formal meetings.
Right. And then there's Take a Bite, which we talked about earlier, which encourages teams to break down those big, overwhelming requirements into smaller, more manageable chunks, to learn fast, get feedback, and adapt quickly.
Exactly.
And then there's Go See, which encourages managers to actually get out of their offices and visit the Gemba, or the real place of work, to actually observe how teams are working and identify any obstacles or challenges they might be facing. So it's about shifting from that top down command and control approach to something that's more collaborative and supportive.
Right, right.
But even with all these guides and principles in place, there are bound to be some challenges when implementing LeSS, right?
Oh, of course, of course. And our sources highlight some common roadblocks that organizations might encounter. For instance,
Yeah.
managing dependencies can get tricky when you have multiple teams working on a single product.
Yeah. And their advice wasn't about like trying to manage dependencies, but about minimizing the constraints that those dependencies create, right? They recommend like thinking about splitting the work differently and prioritizing items in a way that reduces the impact of those dependencies.
So,
And then there's the challenge of dealing with those really massive complex requirements that can just seem downright overwhelming.
yeah, and their suggestion for tackling those big requirements is to create a new requirement area with a dedicated team to focus specifically on breaking down that gigantic requirement into smaller, more manageable pieces. It's about making progress and gaining momentum, even when you're faced with a really daunting task.
Absolutely. And perhaps most importantly, they emphasize the need for patience and persistence. Transitioning to LeSS isn't always, smooth sailing. There will be bumps along the way, but it's crucial to stay focused on those long-term goals and benefits. Right. And one of the most powerful ways to really demonstrate the value of LeSS is to deliver a truly done increment. Each sprint, this not only builds confidence within the teams, but it also provides tangible evidence of progress to stakeholders and customers.
Exactly. And speaking of done, we need to talk about the definition of done in LeSS.
Yeah.
It's about establishing that shared understanding of what it means for an item to be truly complete. It ensures consistency and quality across all the teams.
Okay, yeah. So one of the sources you gave me actually walked through a really practical process for creating and evolving a definition of done. They started by identifying all the activities involved in actually shipping to end customers. So that includes coding, testing, documentation, deployment, even setting up customer support. So it's about taking that holistic view of the entire development lifecycle and considering everything that needs to happen for a product increment to be truly valuable and usable by the customer.
Exactly. And then they talked about figuring out which of those activities could actually be accomplished, realistically within each sprint. So it's about finding that balance between what's ideal and what's achievable given the team's current, capabilities and resources.
Right, and that's where that concept of undone work comes in, right? It represents that gap between the ideal definition of done and what the team can actually achieve within a sprint.
Yeah, and they really stress the importance of addressing that undone work because ignoring it can lead to delays, risks, and a lack of transparency. For example, if like performance testing is consistently left undone, you might not discover those performance issues until much later in the development cycle when they become much harder and costlier to fix.
Right. So it's about being honest with yourselves about what you can actually get done within a sprint.
Yeah, and they cautioned against using what they call undone departments as a workaround. So instead of having like separate teams to handle that undone work, LeSS encourages integrating those activities into the definition of done and empowering those feature teams to take ownership of the entire process.
Okay, so the key takeaway here is that the definition of done is not a static checklist. It's really a living document that evolves as the team's capabilities grow and they strive to deliver those more complete and valuable product increments.
Exactly. And that leads us to the next stage in the LeSS framework, which is product backlog refinement. And this is the process of preparing those items in the product backlog for those upcoming sprints, making sure that they're, clear, concise, and ready for teams to start working on.
Right, and we already touched on the different types of refinement in less, like overall refinement, multi-team refinement, and even multi-site refinement for those distributed teams. So it's about choosing the right approach based on the nature and complexity of the items you're refining.
Exactly. And Lay emphasizes, collaboration and shared understanding throughout this process. It's not just about the product owner dictating those requirements. It's about the teams working together, engaging in those discussions and really understanding those customer needs to come up with the best solutions.
Right, and they highlighted the importance of involving the right people in those refinement sessions too. It's not just developers and testers. You might need subject matter experts, customers, or other stakeholders who can provide valuable insights.
Right.
And then of course splitting is a crucial part of product backlog refinement. It's about taking those bigger, more complex items and breaking them down into smaller, more manageable chunks that can be completed within a sprint.
Right, right. And they offer some good tips for effective splitting, emphasizing the importance of creating customer-centric vertical slices that actually deliver value to the end user.
Yeah.
So it's not about splitting along, arbitrary technical boundaries. It's about delivering those tangible benefits to the customer with each increment.
Right. So it's about focusing on the customer value, not just the technical implementation details.
Exactly.
And then there's estimation, which plays a key role in prioritizing those items in the product backlog and forecasting how much work the teams can realistically accomplish within a sprint.
Yeah. And they highlighted several reasons why estimation is important in less, such as prioritizing for the highest return on investment, synchronizing those delivery dates with stakeholders, and evaluating the risks when you're making those release promises.
Okay, so it's about having that shared understanding of the effort involved and making sure that you're setting realistic expectations.
Right, right. But they also emphasize the need to keep estimation, simple and to choose a technique that really fits the team's context and the purpose of the estimation. So it's not about getting bogged down in complex calculations. It's about driving those conversations, learning and achieving that shared understanding.
Right. It's about the communication and the collaboration, not just, crunching numbers.
Exactly. And they offered some practical tips for effective estimation in like calibrating your estimates against previously completed items and using techniques like planning poker to really encourage that collaborative decision making.
Right. So it's about using those techniques to kind of get everyone on the same page.
Right. And to ensure that consistency and make it easier to plan at the product level, they also highlighted the importance of all the teams agreeing on a common understanding of the point scale they're using.
Right. So everyone's speaking the same language, so to speak, when it comes to estimation.
Exactly.
Okay. So once those product backlog items have been refined, split, and estimated, it's time for the next crucial event in the LeSS framework, which is sprint planning, and this is where the team gets together to decide what they're going to work on during the upcoming sprint and how they're going to achieve their goals.
Right, and as we discussed earlier, sprint planning in LeSS is divided into those two distinct parts: sprint planning 1 and sprint planning 2.
Right.
And one of the interesting things about sprint planning 1 and LeSS is that it often involves those team representatives rather than every single team member. This helps streamline the process and keep the focus on the big picture.
Right. So during sprint planning 1, those representatives work with the product owner to discuss those prioritized items from the product backlog, consider dependencies, and make sure that everything aligns with the overall sprint goals.
Exactly.
And because LeSS is all about flexibility and adapting to the situation. They even suggest inviting other experts to sprint planning one as needed. So that could include, product managers, users, or customers who can provide valuable insights and help answer
It's about having the right people there to make those informed decisions.
Exactly. And then once those sprint goals are set and the items are selected, each team moves on to sprint planning 2, which is where they focus on how they're going to deliver their selected items. So typically that involves, designing a solution and creating their sprint backlog, which outlines the tasks that are needed to complete those items. And they really strongly recommend avoiding software tools for the sprint backlog. They advocate for using those physical tools like cards on a wall to really enhance that team interaction, visibility, and flexibility.
Right. It's about making it more tangible, making it visual.
Yeah, it's about creating that visual representation of the sprint goals and the work involved, which makes it much easier for the team to stay organized, track their progress, and work together effectively. Now, in a multi-team less environment, sprint planning also has to account for coordination and integration, right? It's not just about each team planning their own work. It's about making sure that those plans align and that the teams can work together effectively to deliver that cohesive product increment.
Exactly, and they recommend holding, multi-team sprint planning 2 meetings where the teams can discuss those dependencies, coordinate their work, and identify any potential roadblocks or challenges that might come up.
Right. And then in Less Huge, with its larger scale and those requirement areas, they highlight the importance of the product owner team meeting. So this gives the product owner and the area product owners a chance to sync up, discuss overall progress and alignment, and make any necessary adjustments to the product backlog. So it's all about finding that balance, right, between giving those teams autonomy, but also making sure that everyone is moving in the same direction towards that shared goal of delivering a valuable product.
Exactly.
Now, zooming out a bit, we need to address this broader topic of coordination and integration in a LeSS environment. With multiple teams working on a single product, how do you make sure that everyone is working smoothly and effectively together?
Right. One of the sources really stress the importance of establishing what they called a coordination-friendly environment. So they talked about things like co-locating those teams, fostering a culture of open communication, and making sure that you have the right tools and infrastructure in place to support collaboration.
Right. So it's about creating the right environment, the right culture for collaboration to thrive.
Exactly. And they brought back the just talk principle here, encouraging those teams to bypass those formal processes and hierarchies and just talk directly to each other to find solutions.
Yeah, and it's about empowering the teams to own those challenges and to find those solutions together.
Right. And then they introduced this concept called communicate and code, which is about using the code base itself as a communication tool. So leveraging that code to signal your intentions, to identify potential conflicts, and to collaborate on solutions.
It's almost like having a conversation through the code, right?
Right, exactly. And they also emphasized integrate continuously as a really fundamental practice in LeSS. It's about encouraging that frequent integration of code changes to make sure that everyone is working with the latest version, and to minimize those integration issues down the road.
Right. So instead of waiting until the end and then having this big, integration hell situation, you're integrating constantly throughout the process.
Exactly. And they stress that continuous integration isn't just about having a build system. It's about fostering that developer mindset of integrating those small changes frequently as soon as they're ready.
So it's about taking that iterative and incremental approach to the next level, embracing those frequent integration points as opportunities for feedback and adaptation.
Exactly.
Okay, so another challenge with scaling Agile is how do you maintain consistency in your technical practices and standards across multiple teams?
Yeah, and that's where communities come in. So these are essentially groups of passionate volunteers from different teams that come together to learn from each other, share their knowledge, and establish guidelines or standards for their area of expertise.
So they mentioned communities focused on things like the human interface, design and architecture and testing as being really crucial for those successful LeSS adoption.
Right, right. And they emphasize that these communities need to be, self-organizing, driven by the enthusiasm of the people in them. It's about creating those spaces where people can connect, share what they know, and really drive that continuous improvement in the areas they're passionate about.
And they also highlighted the importance of the communities having, those clear aims and authorities, so
Hmm.
making sure that their work aligns with the overall product goals and that they actually have the power to make decisions and implement changes. They even had some practical tips for making those communities work effectively.
Yeah, like having a dedicated coordinator, establishing those clear working agreements, and using tools like wikis and discussion groups to make it easier to communicate and collaborate. And they also talked about company-wide communities, which can be really helpful for addressing those concerns that span, multiple products or departments.
So it's about recognizing those cross-cutting concerns and,
Yeah.
and creating those spaces for people to come together and address them.
Exactly. But they also cautioned against some common pitfalls that can really hinder the effectiveness of those communities.
Like what?
Things like having too many meetings that aren't really productive, or viewing the community work as kind of secondary to that real work of feature development. It's about recognizing that the communities play a really vital role in supporting a LeSS adoption and fostering that collaboration, knowledge sharing, and continuous improvement throughout the organization.
Right. It's about giving them the support and the recognition they deserve.
Exactly.
Okay, so now in a LeSS environment, that coordination and integration go beyond just, those technical practices and standards. They highlight a whole toolkit of techniques and practices to help those teams work together effectively.
Yeah, like cross-team meetings, which can be really helpful for discussing those dependencies, aligning those plans, and identifying any potential roadblocks early on. And they had some really great tips for making those cross-team meetings more productive.
Like what?
Things like using video conferencing effectively, leveraging those cloud-based shared document tools, and employing techniques like diverge merge to kind of balance those centralized discussions with more focused, decentralized problem solving.
Okay, so it's about finding the right balance between those two approaches.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
they also talked about the importance of those multi-team design workshops where representatives from different teams can get together and collaborate on those complex features or components. And they emphasized having those vast whiteboard spaces for those workshops, encouraging those teams to use physical tools and visual representations to really facilitate that brainstorming, discussion, and shared understanding.
I like that. Get everyone up, moving around, get those creative juices flowing.
Exactly, and they even suggested using those collaborative sketching whiteboard apps on tablets or browsers
Yeah.
for those multi-site design workshops, which is a great way to bring distributed teams together.
Right. And then they also highlighted the value of those current architecture workshops, particularly when you're transitioning from those component teams to feature teams. And these workshops basically educate everyone on the existing architecture of the system, making sure that everyone understands how those different parts work together.
Right. It's about building that shared understanding, which makes it much easier for everyone to collaborate and to make those good decisions about
Mhm.
design and development. And then they introduce the concept of component mentors. So these are those experienced developers who have a really deep understanding of a specific component or area of the system, and they act as guides and advisors, helping those other teams navigate the intricacies of that component and make those smart decisions.
So it's like having a resident expert for each part of the system, someone who can share their knowledge and experience and help others avoid those potential pitfalls.
Exactly. And they provided some guidance on how to make that mentoring role effective, highlighting the importance of clearly defined responsibilities,
Yeah.
sharing that workload, and focusing on teaching through techniques like pair programming or mob programming.
Okay, so it's about creating those opportunities for knowledge sharing and mentorship.
Exactly.
It's great.
And then there's open space, which is another really intriguing technique for coordination and learning.
Yeah.
This is a self-organizing meeting format that empowers participants to create their own agenda and really drive those discussions. So it's all about fostering that ownership and engagement by letting the participants decide what's most important to talk about.
Okay, yeah, that sounds really interesting. So how does that work in practice?
Well, they suggested using open space for things like those overall retrospectives, those quarterly learning meetings, and even for community gatherings. It's about creating that space for dynamic, self-directed conversations and collaboration.
And they also touched on a few other techniques like travelers, which are those experienced team members that temporarily embed themselves with other teams to offer expertise or support. And then you've got scouts who visit other teams to learn something specific and then bring that knowledge back to their own team. And they even mentioned the leading team concept, where one team takes the lead on a specific feature or area of the system and provides guidance and support to the other teams as they get up to speed.
Right, and they did caution against relying too heavily on the Scrum of Scrums meeting, suggesting that it can sometimes create more overhead than it's worth.
So the key takeaway here is that LeSS offers this toolkit of different techniques and practices for coordination and integration. And it's about finding the right combination that fits your specific context and needs.
Exactly, and one of the key points that they emphasize is that it's not just about those formal mechanisms or processes. It's about nurturing those informal, self-organizing interactions that are so essential for agility and responsiveness.
Right. It's about finding that balance between structure and flexibility, giving those teams the autonomy to adapt and innovate, but also making sure that everyone is working together effectively. Now let's talk about two really crucial events in LeSS, the sprint review and the retrospective.
These events are all about reflecting on the sprint, gathering feedback, and figuring out how to improve.
And they highlighted the importance of the overall retrospective in LeSS. So unlike this individual team retrospectives, this one focuses on the entire system, bringing together representatives from all the teams, the product owners, scrum masters, and even managers to discuss any systemic issues and to design those experiments for improvement.
Right, and during those overall retrospectives, they really recommend taking a systems thinking approach. They encourage using those visual models like causal loop diagrams to really map out those interconnections within the system and to pinpoint those potential areas for improvement.
Right. So it's about understanding those dependencies and realizing that optimizing one part of the system without considering the impact on the other parts can sometimes backfire.
Exactly. You need to see the whole picture, not just those individual pieces.
And they also highlighted the importance of discussing those underlying beliefs and assumptions during those modeling sessions. Sometimes, teams can get so focused on the technical details that they forget to step back and challenge those fundamental beliefs that might be driving their decisions.
Right. It's about making sure that everyone is aligned and they're working from that shared understanding of the system.
Right. So now shifting gears a bit, let's talk about the role of management in LeSS. This is something that often sparks some interesting conversations when we talk about agile transformations.
Yeah. One of the sources had a pretty bold statement about this. They said that in a true LeSS organization, managers are actually optional.
Optional. Wow. Okay, so you're saying no managers at all.
Well, it's not quite that simple. What they're really saying is that if there are managers in a LeSS organization, their role needs to change pretty significantly. It's less about directing and controlling those teams and more about improving the system's ability to deliver value.
So it's a much more hands-off approach, focusing on creating the right environment for those teams to thrive and deliver value. They use the term "go see" to describe this new role for managers. So encouraging them to spend time observing how the teams are working, understanding those challenges, and supporting those efforts to improve.
Right. It's about being a servant leader, not a dictator. They even suggested a reading list for LeSS managers with books on systems thinking, lean management, and servant leadership.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's clear they see a very, very different kind of manager in a less organization, someone who's more of a coach and facilitator, helping those teams embrace those less principles and navigate the complexities of scaling agile. And this ties back really nicely to the more with less principle, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, yeah. And their principle also applies to how we use metrics. They were very clear about this. Metrics are not tools for control or setting targets for teams. It's not about using numbers to micromanage people.
Right. So instead of focusing on those individual performance metrics or setting unrealistic targets, they emphasize using those metrics to gain insights, to support decision making, and to foster learning and improvement across the organization.
Exactly. And this quote really stuck with me. Focus on purpose, not on targets. Targets without purpose is not command and control management. It's dictatorship.
It's a powerful reminder that the metrics should serve a purpose. They shouldn't become an end in themselves. Now let's talk about another really key role in LeSS, the Scrum Master. What role do they play in all of this?
Well, one of the sources had a really great analogy for the Scrum Master in LeSS. They said that the Scrum Master should be like a gardener, not a commander.
I like it. So instead of trying to control or direct the teams, the Scrum Master is creating the right environment for them to grow and flourish. Providing those tools and support they need to succeed.
Exactly. And they offered a whole toolkit of techniques that Scrum Masters can use in LeSS, focusing on things like asking powerful questions, facilitating those large group meetings effectively, promoting learning and skill development, and fostering that culture of continuous improvement.
Right. So it's about being a guide, a facilitator, a mentor. They even provided a Scrum Master survival guide with practical advice for navigating those challenges of a less adoption. So it's clear that the Scrum Master has a really crucial role in guiding and supporting those teams as they transition to less and embrace those core principles.
Exactly.
Now, one of the keys to successful product development, regardless of whether you're using less or not, is ensuring that everyone is aligned on what it means for work to be truly done.
Right. And that's where the definition of done comes in. It's about establishing that shared understanding across all the teams of what constitutes a finished piece of work, ensuring that consistency and quality.
Right. So one of the sources that you gave me actually walks us through a really practical process for creating and evolving a definition of done. They emphasize starting by identifying all the activities that are involved in delivering a complete product increment to the end customer.
Right. And that includes everything from coding and testing to documentation, deployment, setting up customer support, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
It's about looking at the big picture and making sure nothing gets overlooked.
Right. So you're not just thinking about the code, you're thinking about everything that needs to happen for the customer to actually be able to use and benefit from the product.
Exactly.
And then they talk about figuring out which of those activities can realistically be accomplished within each sprint. So it's about finding that balance between that ideal definition of done and what's actually feasible given the team's capabilities and resources at that point in time.
Right, and that's where that concept of undone work comes in. It represents that gap between the ideal and the achievable, and they highlighted the importance of acknowledging and addressing that undone work, because ignoring it can lead to those delays, those risks, and a lack of transparency.
Right. So for example, if performance testing is consistently left as undone work, you might not discover those performance issues until much later in the development process when they're much more difficult and expensive to fix.
Exactly. And they cautioned against trying to solve that problem by creating what they called undone departments.
Right. So it's not about creating those separate teams to handle that undone work, but it's about integrating those activities into the definition of done and giving those feature teams the ownership of the entire process.
Exactly.
So the key takeaway here is that the definition of done is not some static checklist. It's a living document. It evolves as the team grows and matures, and they strive to deliver those more complete and valuable product increments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the next stage in the LeSS framework, which is product backlog refinement. And this is where the team prepares those items in the product backlog for those upcoming sprints, making sure that they're clear, concise, and ready for teams to start working on.
Right. And we already touched on those different types of refinement in less, like overall refinement, multi-team refinement, and multi-site refinement for those distributed teams. It's about choosing the right approach based on what you're refining.
Exactly. And Les emphasizes that collaboration and shared understanding throughout that process. It's not just about the product owner dictating those requirements. It's about those teams working together, engaging in those discussions, and really understanding those customer needs to come up with those best solutions.
Right. And they also highlighted the importance of involving those right people in those refinement sessions. It's not just developers and testers. You might need those subject matter experts, those customers or other stakeholders who can bring those valuable insights to the table.
Exactly.
And then, of course, there's splitting, which is a key activity during product backlog refinement. It's about taking those larger, more complex items and breaking them down into those smaller, more manageable chunks that can be completed within a sprint.
Right, right. And they offered some really good tips for effective splitting, emphasizing the importance of creating those customer-centric vertical slices that deliver value to the end user. It's not about splitting along those arbitrary technical boundaries. It's about delivering those tangible benefits to the customer with each increment.
So it's about focusing on the customer value, not just the technical implementation details. And then there's estimation, which is crucial for prioritizing those items in the product backlog and forecasting how much work those teams can realistically accomplish within a sprint.
Yeah, and they outline several reasons why estimation is important and less, such as prioritizing for the highest return on investment, synchronizing those delivery dates with stakeholders, and evaluating those risks when you're making those release promises.
Okay, so it's about having that shared understanding of the effort involved and making sure that you're setting those realistic expectations.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But they also emphasized keeping estimation simple and choosing a technique that suits the team's context and the purpose of the estimation. It's not about getting bogged down in complex calculations. It's about driving those conversations, learning and achieving that shared understanding.
Right. It's about the communication and collaboration, not just crunching numbers.
Exactly. And they offered some practical tips for effective estimation in less like calibrating your estimates against previously completed items, and using techniques like planning poker to encourage that collaborative decision making.
Right. So it's about using those techniques to kind of get everyone on the same page.
Right, and to ensure that consistency and make it easier to plan at the product level.
Mhm.
They also highlighted the importance of all the teams agreeing on a common understanding of the point scale they're using.
Right. So everyone's speaking the same language when it comes to estimation.
Exactly.
Okay. So once those product backlog items have been refined, split, and estimated, it's time for sprint planning. This is where the team gets together to decide what they'll be working on during that upcoming sprint and how they'll achieve their goals.
Right. And as we mentioned before in LeSS, sprint planning is divided into those two parts: sprint planning 1 and sprint planning 2.
Right.
And one of the interesting things about sprint planning 1 and less is that it often involves those team representatives rather than every single team member. And this helps to streamline that process and keep the focus on that big picture.
Right. So during sprint planning 1, those representatives work with the product owner to discuss those prioritized items from the product backlog, consider those dependencies, and make sure that everything aligns with the overall sprint goals.
Exactly.
And since less is all about flexibility and adapting to the situation, they even suggest inviting other experts to sprint planning 1 as needed. This could include, those product managers, those users, or even those customers who can provide those valuable insights and help answer questions.
Right. It's about having those right people there to make those informed decisions.
Exactly. And then once those sprint goals are set, those items are selected, it moves to sprint planning 2. And this is where each team focuses on how they'll deliver those selected items. Typically, that involves, designing a solution and creating their sprint backlog, which outlines those tasks needed to complete those items.
Right.
And they strongly recommend avoiding software tools for that sprint backlog. They advocate for using those physical tools like cards on a wall to encourage that interaction, that collaboration, that shared understanding of the work. It's about making it tangible, making it visual.
Exactly. They highlight the benefits of those physical tools like increased team interaction, better visibility into the work, and greater flexibility to make those changes as needed.
Right. So it's about getting away from those screens and getting people interacting with each other and with the work in a more tactile, visual way. Now, in a multi-team less environment, sprint planning also has to account for coordination and integration, right? It's not just about each team planning their own work. It's about making sure that those plans align, that the teams can work together effectively to deliver that cohesive product increment.
Absolutely. They recommend holding those multi-team sprint planning 2 meetings where the teams can discuss those dependencies, coordinate their work, and identify any potential roadblocks or challenges that might come up.
Right. And then in less huge with its larger scale and those requirement areas, they highlight the importance of that product owner team meeting. So this gives the product owner and those area product owners a chance to sync up, discuss the overall progress and alignment and make any necessary adjustments to that product backlog.
Yeah.
It's all about finding that balance, right, between giving those teams the autonomy, but also making sure that everyone's moving in the same direction towards that shared goal of delivering a valuable product.
That's exactly.
Now, zooming out a bit, we need to address this broader topic of coordination and integration in a LeSS environment. With multiple teams working on a single product, how do you make sure that everyone is working smoothly and effectively together?
One of the sources really stressed the importance of creating that coordination-friendly environment. They talked about things like co-locating those teams, fostering that culture of open communication, and making sure that you have the right tools and infrastructure in place to support that collaboration.
Right. So it's about creating the right environment, the right culture for collaboration to thrive.
Exactly. And they brought back the Just Talk principle here, encouraging those teams to bypass those formal processes and hierarchies and just talk directly to each other to find those solutions.
Yeah, and it's about empowering those teams to own those challenges and to find those solutions together.
Right. And then they introduced this concept called communicate and code, which is about using the code base itself as a communication tool, leveraging that code to signal your intentions, to identify potential conflicts, and to collaborate on those solutions.
It's almost like having a conversation through the code, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And then they also emphasized integrate continuously as a really fundamental practice in Leslie. It's about encouraging those frequent integrations of code changes to make sure that everyone is working with the latest version and minimizing those integration issues down the line. They stress that continuous integration isn't just about having a build system. It's about fostering that developer mindset of integrating those small changes frequently as soon as they're ready.
Right. So instead of waiting till the end and then having this big integration hell situation, you're integrating constantly throughout the process.
Exactly.
And another challenge with scaling agile is how do you maintain that consistency in your technical practices and standards across those multiple teams?
That's where communities come in, right? Those are essentially groups of passionate volunteers from those different teams that come together to learn from each other, to share that knowledge, and to establish those guidelines or standards for their area of expertise.
So they mentioned communities focused on things like the human interface, design and architecture and testing as being really crucial for those successful LeSS adoptions.
Right, and they emphasize that these communities need to be self-organizing, driven by the enthusiasm of their members. It's about creating those spaces where people can connect, can share their knowledge, and can drive that continuous improvement within their areas of passion.
And they also highlighted the importance of those those communities having, clear aims and authority, making sure that their work aligns with those overall product goals, and that they have the power to make those decisions and implement changes. They even had some practical tips for making those communities work effectively.
Right. Things like having a dedicated coordinator, establishing those clear working agreements, and utilizing tools like wikis and discussion groups to facilitate that communication and collaboration. They also talked about company-wide communities, which can be really helpful for addressing concerns that span multiple products or departments.
So it's about recognizing those cross-cutting concerns and creating those spaces for people to come together and address them.
Exactly, but they also cautioned against some common pitfalls that can really hinder the effectiveness of those communities.
Mhm.
Things like holding those frequent meetings just for the sake of meeting, or viewing that community work is kind of secondary to the real work of feature development.
Mhm.
It's about recognizing that those communities play a really vital role in supporting a less adoption and fostering that collaboration, that knowledge sharing, and that continuous improvement throughout the organization.
Right. It's about giving them the support and the recognition they deserve.
Exactly.
Okay, so now in a less environment, that coordination and integration go beyond just those technical practices and standards. They highlighted a whole toolkit of techniques and practices to help those teams work together effectively.
Right. Things like cross-team meetings, which can
Okay.
be really helpful for discussing those dependencies, aligning those plans, and identifying those potential roadblocks early on. They had some great tips for making those cross-team meetings more productive.
Like what?
Things like using video conferencing effectively,
Yeah.
leveraging those cloud-based shared document tools, and employing those techniques like diverge merge to kind of balance those centralized discussions with more focused, decentralized problem solving.
Okay, so it's about finding the right balance between those two approaches.
Exactly. And they also talked about the importance of those multi-team design workshops where representatives from those different teams can get together and collaborate on those complex features or components. And they emphasize having those vast whiteboard spaces for those workshops, encouraging those teams to use those physical tools and visual representations to really facilitate that brainstorming, that discussion, and that shared understanding.
I like that. Get everyone up, moving around, get those creative juices flowing.
Exactly. And they even suggested using those collaborative sketching whiteboard apps on tablets or browsers for those multi-site design workshops, which is a great way to bring distributed teams together.
Right. So it's about finding those ways to make it work. Even when those teams aren't physically located in the same place.
Exactly.
And they also highlighted the value of those current architecture workshops, particularly when you're transitioning from those component teams to feature teams. And these workshops basically educate everyone on the existing architecture of the system, making sure everyone understands how those different parts work together.
Right. It's about building that shared understanding, which makes it much easier for everyone to collaborate and make those good decisions about design and development.
Okay.
And they introduced the concept of component mentors, which are those experienced developers who have a deep understanding of a specific component or area of the system, and they act as guides and advisors, helping those other teams navigate the intricacies of that component and make those smart design decisions.
Right. So it's like having a resident expert for each part of the system,
Yeah.
someone who can share that knowledge and experience and help others avoid those potential pitfalls.
Exactly. And they provided some guidance on how to make that mentoring role effective, highlighting the importance of clearly defined responsibilities, sharing that workload, and focusing on teaching through techniques like pair programming or mob programming.
Okay, so it's about creating those opportunities for knowledge sharing and mentorship.
Exactly.
It's great.
And then there's open space, which is another really intriguing technique for coordination and learning. This is a self-organizing meeting format that empowers those those participants to create their own agenda and really drive those discussions. So it's all about fostering that ownership and engagement by letting the participants decide what's most important to talk about.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So how does that work in practice?
Well, they suggested using open space for things like those overall retrospectives, those quarterly learning meetings, and even for community gatherings. It's about creating that space for those dynamic, self-directed conversations and collaboration.
And they also touched on a few other techniques like travelers, which are those experienced team members that temporarily embed themselves with other teams to offer expertise or support. And then you've got scouts who visit other teams to learn something specific and then bring that knowledge back to their own team.
And they even mentioned the leading team concept, where one team takes the lead on a specific feature or area of the system and provides guidance and support to the other teams as they come up to speed. They did caution against relying too heavily on the Scrum of Scrums meeting. They said it can sometimes create more overhead than it's worth.
So the main takeaway here is that LeSS offers this toolkit of different techniques and practices for coordination and integration. It's about choosing that right combination for your specific context.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's not just about relying solely on those formal mechanisms or processes. It's about nurturing those informal self-organizing interactions that are so essential for true agility and responsiveness.
It's about finding that balance, right, between that structure and flexibility, giving those teams the autonomy to adapt and innovate, but also making sure that everyone is working together effectively.
Absolutely.
Well, as we wrap up our exploration of LeSS, any final thoughts? What really stood out to you from all of this?
The biggest thing for me is that less is more than just a framework. It's really a mindset shift. It's about embracing simplicity, adopting that systems thinking approach, empowering those teams, and relentlessly focusing on delivering value to the customer.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what's so exciting is that LeSS provides this way for organizations to scale agile without losing the essence of what makes agile so powerful. It's about taking those core principles of Scrum and applying them in a way that works for large complex product development.
Exactly.
And that's something to keep in mind as you continue exploring LeSS. Think about how those principles could not only transform your development process, but also really impact your entire organizational culture.
Right.
Could this be the key to unlocking greater agility, customer focus, and team ownership within your organization? It's definitely a compelling framework, and we encourage you to dive in and see how it might fit your specific needs and aspirations.
Yeah.
The journey to building truly valuable products is never ending, and LeSS might just be that roadmap you need to navigate the complexities of scaling agile.
See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.